Okay, so I'm here with Taylor from Here Be Monsters. We're playing with Here Be Monsters on 9/6 at Cine with Parking Garage, and then of course, us. Um, yeah, Taylor, I would describe y'all's sound as kind of like an emo tinged folk punk kind of thing, like folk punk is definitely the center of this, but like there's, definitely some emo influences in my ears at least. So I guess how would you briefly describe your sound if someone's like, so what's your band like, man?
That's yeah. I've wrestled with that question for like a decade now. The description that I've landed on is we're a folk punk adjacent band.
Okay.
It's not like pure folk punk. We don't have a fiddle player or a washboard player yet. Who knows? Uh, give it time. But yeah, no, you're right. It definitely comes from like a core of like acoustic folk punk. A lot of the classics like Ramshackle Glory, early Frank Turner, AJJ. These were like the biggest early influences in songwriting. And recently, especially in the last couple of years, I've started experimenting with more of like a full band sound. And so, yeah, it's not pure folk punk anymore. It kind of used to be, but folk punk adjacent is kind of where I've landed.
Very cool. I think it's appropriate in a little more context. So I feel like what song of yours would you tell people to check out if they're brand new to the band?
Now, let me see. I would probably tell you to check out Call It What It Is. This is a new single that we put out in March of this year. It is, I think we actually talked about it beforehand because you were writing a political song at the time too.
Right.
And you asked me what it was about. And I'm like, it's basically just a barn burner. Like just, it's one of my few kind of, I usually try and have like a light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. And like Call It What It is not really that song. But
Right.
but it's super fun. It's a very fun song to write. It was fun to write and fun to record, and it's even more fun to play live.
Hell yeah. I think it's a great sort of capture of sort of the full band live sound, especially with
Very
what you
much.
do. But you kind of do a lot of cool stuff. So I feel like when you're trying to recommend one song, there's always like, yeah, it really shows this about us well, but it doesn't necessarily give you the full picture.
Yeah.
So without recommending a whole other handful of songs to listen to, what about your sound or your style does that song not capture that like people might also like?
So Call It What It Is. I love it, but it is a super formulaic song. And if you want a sample of my music that is not formulaic in the least, I would highly recommend you check out the song Liminal Space from the Liminal Space EP. If you're familiar with song structures, most songs are like, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, done. This song is parts A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, D, and then it's done.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like a 7-minute long song. It's one of the more ambitious things that I've done as far as songwriting goes. So that would be my other recommendation if you want to get the other end of the spectrum, because it's also completely acoustic, whereas Call It is entirely full band.
Yeah, no, I think that would be what I would pick as the two kind of like polars, but
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that liminal space sort of really captures what I really love about a lot of your writing is you do a lot of sort of ambitious song structures or even just like ambitious like big textures, but the thing that makes a lot of those things have, I think, like shape, which I love that you do, is it really works towards these big, memorable spots. So even if, a listener comes out of listening to Liminal Space and it's like, wow, I just heard so many different things, like they might still think of the like, I'm in an endless horizon, kind of like getting to the sort of pivotal moments in the show tune jazz hand spots, even though your music's not like as theatery as mine.
I was going to say, but we have that in common though. Like,
Yeah.
I think I remember when I first heard Pills, you have like this totally a cappella bridge at the end of it. And like to this day, that is the part of the song that I find myself just humming as I go through my day. So yeah, no, like those moments are critical, right? I think that they are, especially if you come from a theater background, which I kind of do. I was in like some high school production stuff, but like most of that kind of songwriting is all about like those moments. Right.
For sure.
When you have like, I dreamed a dream, right, from Les Mis, it's all about that line, like, I thought this life would be so much better than the hell I'm living. Right. And it's
Totally.
all that line. And everything else is great. it's awesome. But like that's the line that gets people and like brings people in, you know?
Yeah, and I think you need to have those big memorable moments if you're not gonna just write a song where the chorus is essentially what you're getting to. And a lot of songs, that's great, and it's a good formula because it works.
Yeah.
But if you're not relying kind of on the backbone of like, hey, my chorus is an absolute bop, it's the hook, and everything else just kind of gets the energy to flow to and away from that, you do have to find those other spots. So yeah, I'm wondering too, like, obviously, because that's something we have in common. It's a thing that I find really attractive about your music. But what do you think is the most common compliment you get about your sound from just, folks in general?
Oh man. That's actually really hard. Because I try my best not to pay attention to compliments. I'm very, very bad at taking them a lot of the time. I've tried to get better. But I definitely try not to hold on to them too long. I guess the thing that probably I think I'm complimented most often on is songwriting. It is about having a sense of when things need to build, when things need to drop, when things need to like hold steady. So a lot of they're very like abstract compliments, but I'll get these compliments that are like that thing that you did just fits. Like, have you ever had that, like, where you like listen to a song? I know that I get this when I listen to there's a folk punk artist named Matt Pless, and his lyrics are unreal.
Yeah.
You listen to the song and you're like, it couldn't have been any other way than this thing. It just fits so perfectly lyrically that like you can't imagine it any other way. And I'll get weird compliments that kind of indicate towards that is like it just worked.
For sure. That's such a good description. It's funny. I think Matt Plus and I are actually connected on TikTok as much as, I know
really?
I'm the only person in the Athens scene that likes TikTok. But
yeah, you are.
So you've kind of touched on this some of, a lot of these sort of names that you've thrown out. So I'd love kind of like not like a super detailed, don't give me a diatribe and not like an elevator pitch, but give me a medium level overview of like how you got to this point as a musician. Like, I want to know sort of like, what I'm trying to understand essentially is like getting a sense of your musical ear, right? Like, how did you get into music? What are the kind of bands or the scenes that were really influential to like your development as a songwriter or as a performer? What kind of experiences got you to this point in the band? Ideally, I'd love to just kind of like get a small portrait of how did Taylor get to this point, and how can I understand his music better as a result?
Sure. Okay, so going as high level as I can. In high school, I was torn between a lot of punk bands like Rancid and The Offspring on one hand, and then like System of a Down and like Pantera on the other.
That makes so much sense. I'm interrupting, but yeah.
No, it's totally fine. But like I talked about like dynamics, like when things need to drop and when things need to like explode. And like, if you need like System of a Down is the answer to that for me. 100. Right. They master that. So anyways, after high school, I moved into college, and I started getting into, more like lo-fi kind of punk stuff. I remember, when I was living with my roommate Sloan, who is now in Philadelphia, sadly. But they were telling me like, you've got to check out this band, and it was This Bike Is a Pipe Bomb, which I don't know. So they have this great album called Three-Way Tie for Fifth. And like it was like this super stripped down thing, but like I could recognize these elements of like having that sense of what a song needs to be. And so I started listening to a whole bunch of that stuff. That was how I got into more like traditional folk punk, like Mischief Brew, which is also another like huge inspiration for me. At the same time, the person I was dating at that point got me into like a lot of the I don't even know how to classify this group of musicians other than like they were like Hobbit rock. It was like these weird people who like they dressed like old farmers from like the 1800s, and like it was like Stomp Clap Hey, like the Lumineers, Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. Like, so I think
Stomp Clap is kind of the perfect, like, it's the non-mainstream Mumford and Sons, but not super far off the mainstream. Yeah.
But not that far off.
Yeah. It's It's not McDonald's, but it is Chipotle. Right?
Yes, exactly. um, but so that's like phase 2. And then like phase 3 for me was getting into all of these like folk punk adjacent bands, because at that point I was like in my early 20s and I'd really sunk into this just acoustic. Like if it's anything electric, then like I didn't really have anything to do with it. But then like it started eking its way in through artists like Frank Turner, who to this day is one of my biggest influences. It seeped in even more when I discovered people like Jeff Rosenstock, when I first heard like Nausea, when I first heard Worry. Like these influences started creeping their way in, and like you can hear it most on Love Yourself Too Much, which is it's like a fully electric I call it an album. Apparently 8 songs is not long enough to be an album.
No,
I disagree.
The future is chaos, and that's
there you go.
Totally
nothing
fair
means
now.
Nothing means
and it's very
anymore.
Jeff Rosenstock, right? Like
it is. It is. This was like my first year of listening to Jeff Rosenstock, and it obviously it shows. Like when you get to songs like Drug, Sex, and Regrets, there are even like little pauses in that song that I directly stole.
It's a Jeff Rosenstock version of Every Man Has a Molly, in my opinion.
That's exactly what it ended up being. So yeah, in like as brief a nutshell as I can give you, that's it. So it's like System of a Down and Rancid and Offspring in phase 1. Then you've got like traditional folk punk like This Bike Is a Pipe Bomb, Mischief Brew, and then like Hobbit Rock, Stomp Clap Hey, Lumineers, Edward Sharpe, and then you've got like Frank Turner, and you've got Jeff Rosenstock. Those are kind of like the 3 phases that I've gone through.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
So, I know this question is maybe built antithetical to who you are. So I'm asking this.
I'm so excited.
So I kind of want to understand the development of a song. I feel like everyone has a different process, and that also helps me understand like how it becomes a real thing.
Sure.
And I know you actually experiment a lot and change this a lot, but I would say, what is your most like typical process of a song from inception to it either being ready to record or ready to be played live?
Yeah. So the keyword in my songwriting repertoire is patience. I have songs on the back burner sometimes for years at a time. I firmly believe in not rushing things and not forcing myself through to make stuff happen. And like I've done it before. In 2019, if you followed me for a long period of time, I actually did like a song of the week challenge where like every week I wrote a new song. Most of those were bad. Most of them were not good.
Yeah.
But a couple were, and they made their way on the Sabbatical, which was my album before Love Yourself Too Much. If you're talking about like my typical process, it usually begins either with some kind of a vocal hook that I don't know how to build off of, or a guitar piece, which is going to be the single that I have coming out in a couple of months with Emily. That's Emily Campbell Harden of Swear Jar, and I guess for the next day, way past cool fame. That
will be in the past by the time this comes out. But
yeah, that's fair.
Most recently of both, yeah.
Yeah. That whole thing started with just this guitar bit that I could not get rid of. Like I've just found myself playing it over and over and over and over and over again.
I love those riffs.
Yeah. And like, I love them and I hate them because like I couldn't build off of it. I struggled with it for a year. This song was actually written originally. I was trying to put it on the Liminal Space EP because it's in that same weird tuning that Liminal Space is in. But like, I just couldn't finish it. I just didn't know. I didn't know where it went. And so I tabled it and I worked on some other stuff. And then lo and behold, I came back to it in a couple of months and now the song is mostly written and mostly recorded. And so that's pretty much how it is. Starts with a simple concept and an idea. You let that simmer for a little while and then you just kind of build off of it later. The trick is just having a lot of ideas that are simmering at one time. So that way you usually have a more or less steady stream.
That makes a ton of sense. And I'm the same way. Like the record that we're writing right now like has songs that I wrote like senior year of high school, freshman year of college. I just didn't have a
Hell
place
yeah.
for it, you know? Or
Absolutely.
I have like riffs that you kind of just wonder, like, do I ever get a song that has the right vibe and the right key to get this riff to fit, you know? And when you find it, you're like, hell yeah, I can finally plug this thing
Yep.
in that I've just played when I picked up a guitar for the last 10 years. And now it has a home.
It's literally like finishing a puzzle.
Yeah,
It's like,
no,
oh my God,
100%.
this is the piece. This fits. Like, yeah.
I love that patience too, though, because sometimes I don't necessarily know what I want to say in a verse two or in a bridge or like
Yep.
in an outro. And then I find that like a lot of the songs, you know, when I start writing, it'll come from some kind of genuine emotion or feeling or like place that's serious. And then like I punch it up and it becomes more theatrical, which is I always say, like, don't expect me to be an honest narrator of my life because the songs are like, they come from some actual feeling I had, but they
Sure.
don't represent who I am, you know? But then
well, and-
sometimes the time then as it passes also gives you like emotional perspective of like, I actually have something different to say about this concept because I've now have new feelings about that period of my life that I was, you know, writing in.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, I don't know. I coming from a background of punk where lyrics are always so literal and like they have to be literal.
Right.
One of the things I've been challenging myself to do a lot is using more abstract lyrics because they don't need to be a one-to-one comparison of your feelings, right? Like liminal space is actually a perfect example of that.
100%.
Like that whole that and the song directly before it on the EP called Blackwater, like it's all like veiled allegory and like allusions to like mental health and all this other stuff without me saying like I'm really anxious all the fucking time.
Yeah, and that's something I love about, like you mentioned Jeff Rosenstock. I feel the same way about
Yes.
Say Anything, where it's like a lot of the lyrics they have are still kind of tied to that punk connection of being very direct, but they also spend a lot of time getting away from that direct language. And I find that it makes the direct moments so much more impactful when you kind of have like, hey, I've been hinting towards the thing. And then like eventually you're like, hey, let's just call it what it is, right? Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, I know. You know, I get the clap sound effect here. So anyways,
Yeah.
Next question. So I feel like every songwriter has some element of songs or songwriting or like a live performance that they're particularly dialed into and that they love, but that's not always like immediately apparent when you listen to it like as a new listener. So my example, and you might agree with this, I'm really into like weird but approachable forms for songs. I like love a weird winding bridge after a second chorus.
You do.
Yeah. But you know, from there, like I got to get into like odd genre turns or songs with like weird structures that feel natural. When I can get those things to work, that's what like gets me excited. And a lot of, you know, the listeners might just say like, oh, it's theatrical or, you know, whatever else. So I guess I'm saying if someone's going to come to see you on our show in 9-6, what are like the weird songwriting details or the elements of your live band that you get really excited about, but like someone might not necessarily grasp unless they knew to look for it?
Oh man. I think that one of the things that sometimes gets overlooked is it's the little details that you hear that you don't necessarily realize you're hearing. Like a great example is our bassist Lauren now puts like a lot of harmonies like into our songs that like I only just realized that she was doing some of them in like the practice like a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, holy shit, has she been doing this the whole fucking time? And like John will have like these little leads that like he'll do like in verses like while I'm singing. And so for me it's hearing the culmination of all of these different parts. I think that also comes from like that background in like either being in musical theater or loving musical theater, but like I hate to bring up Les Mis twice in a single interview. It's not even my favorite. It's not even my favorite interview, but like you do have all of these different vocal parts that like link together in so many of their songs. It's such a good like play to use for an example of that. Sure. But so for me, the bit about songwriting that I really love is hearing all of these intertwining parts that are just kind of interlocking together. And you get this very odd syncopation that creates an energy. I feel like I'm using a lot of music buzzwords
the energy
right now.
energy thing is such important to me. And honestly, like if you have a background listening to something like Pantera, like I feel like a lot of metal acts, the energy flow is really the whole point, right? And that's something that I love about music. I'm always thinking about energy flow. As you know, spiritual as that sounds, as much as I'm not a spiritual person at all, but just like kind of those peaks and troughs of like, you know, intensity.
Well, and I mean, it's the core of metal music. It's certainly the core of punk music. Yeah. Right. Like you listen to like old Operation Ivy and stuff. I mean, the recordings they're fine, but being generous.
Right.
They're not like the greatest recordings ever in the world. The point is there's like an energy to those recordings that just can't be mimicked. It can't be, you could take those songs into, you know, $1 million studio and they just wouldn't be as satisfying.
For sure.
So yeah, no, like energy is at the core of everything when you're talking about music. And it can be either a really like hyped up energy, like in a song like you know, a song for every dickhead on Tinder, or it can be like really slow and sad energy.
Right.
Where you get you know, stuff like Sleep or No Power, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, I got one more tough question for you and then two fun ones.
Oh, thank God.
So the last big hard hitter, there's a lot about recording and songwriting that you can care about, you know? And I think you talking about like something like Operation Ivy of like very crusty, like DIY production is an element of like in the old punk scene, some out of necessity, some out of coolness, and some out of like style, like hi-fi production, something they just didn't care about. So I'm wondering, when it comes to either recording or songwriting or performing, what is something that you feel like many people care about, but something that you're not necessarily like that worried about?
So not to sound like the oldest fucking boomer in the room, but like I don't care that much about After Effects. Okay. I'll put like some compression on vocals. I'll put some reverb on vocals just to make it sound like pretty or whatever. I generally don't work with stuff that's going to completely transform the sound. Right. My whole premise, especially since doing Liminal Space, the EP, is that the performance comes first. Like for me, at least, the music is about the performance, and any effects that you use should be used just to make the performance sound better. That obviously isn't like applicable advice if you're doing stuff like EDM. Like at that point, by all means, use whatever effects you want. The whole point there is to, you know, fuck with the electronic signal and make it something different than it was.
For sure.
But for the kind of music that I do, I just don't care if it sounds, I don't care if it sounds perfect. I've actually hit a point with this studio, in fact, where like, I kind of think that like just having a really good recording in this room as it is creates kind of the sound that I want it to have. Like, I don't know if I want a vocal booth. I don't know if I want a whole bunch more soundproofing, because kind of the whole point is just to have it sound like it's coming out of my basement.
It's a sense of place.
Yeah, like ever since like literally my first EP was Alive in My Basement, and that's kind of the aesthetic I've carried my whole career.
That's great. I think of a lot of that kind of mixing and production as almost like different levels of like makeup fancifulness, right? And like there's all levels of valid, from no makeup to like natural makeup to like full on drag, but it just kind of depends on what's the vibe. And yeah, I'm a lot about like mixing that kind of makes it sound like it's not mixed, but it's a lot of attention to like making it still feel like it's a natural performance. So, okay. So letting you off the hook, you passed all the big hard hitting questions. I know, I'm such a pain. So two short ones. What is your ideal post-show meal?
I would be lying to myself if I didn't say Taco Bell.
Hell yes.
It's
a man after my own heart.
Yeah, if you've spoken to me for more than 10 minutes, you know who I am. 100%. You know what I'm about. That being said, I will say that time you took us to Fellini's, so satisfying. Oh my
Bellini's
God.
is the Atlanta local music show for me. And I told you this before, but I'm going to tell everyone else my favorite Fellini's hack if you're an Atlantan. If you go to the Masquerade and you're stuck in that parking deck trying to get out, I just order Fellini's on my phone while I'm in the parking deck line, and then I get there and it's ready, and it's
Oh my
beautiful.
God, yes. Beautiful.
Okay, and so my last one. So obviously, community is super important for local bands. So who's a band in your scene? You can't say me that you think people should check out, and why?
Oh man, do I have to pick one?
Just one arbitrarily, or if you want to shoot a few, just you can shoot a few. But who? Yeah, what's in it? What's
Okay.
next?
So I would be. I'm gonna recommend three. I would be remiss if I didn't pay tribute to Way Past Cool and Phantom Dan. Neither of whom are really like folk punk acts. But they like you opened the question talking about community, and like
Right.
these are the two bands that literally like brought me in. Like when I started playing music in Athens again after a very long hiatus. Literally because Way Past Cool reached out to me and was like, "Hey, come play the show with us." And then my next show,
Yeah, my Murder was on that show with you too.
yeah,
That's how we met.
exactly. And that was also because like they reached out to me,
Right.
and then like this year. We played AFFest. We got to open up the 40-watt show, and that was literally because of Phantom Dan.
Right.
So like for those two bands especially, they have done such a good job of establishing that community and really bringing people in, even people who don't necessarily fit. Like a lot of it is like pop punk and emo stuff. Like they bring in people who don't necessarily fit that vibe. And then for the third, if you want just a really fun fucking time, I have to recommend Cowboy Kerouac.
Yes.
Yeah, Cowboy Kerouac is gay, autistic, queer-coded country about fucking horses, and it's one of my favorite acts in Athens. I do my best not to miss a show with them. Also, Brian is just like a sweetheart. So yeah, no, Cowboy Kerouac, super fun. Have to recommend them as well.
Yeah, I keep meaning to go. We'll have to go together sometime.
Oh, it's so much fun.
I
Yeah.
haven't gotten a chance yet, but yeah, the description you gave is 100% accurate, and I don't think saying any more would give anyone more of a hint. Just go listen to it, and it'll be like,
Just
oh
go.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's absolutely a vibe.
Sick. Well, yeah, thanks so much for blabbing with me, Taylor. And you guys should check out his music. He recommended Call It What It Is and Liminal Spaces as just kind of a couple, samplers. We're playing with Here Be Monsters with Parking Garage at Cine on September 6th, 2 days before my dad's birthday.
Ooh.
And
Happy
it's an
birthday,
all-ages
Mr.
show.
Lewis.
Yeah, thank you. It's Dr. Lewis, actually.
Oh,
Mr.
Oh.
Lewis is his son. Yeah, well, we'll look forward to playing that show with you, and always such a pleasure talking to you, my friend. And
Always.
I will see you around.
Yeah. See you later, y'all. Bye.
Bye.